Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get the meeting underway, and if I can please call this meeting to order. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to today's agenda?
We have no changes to today's agenda, but copies of the presentation have been distributed to you.
Yes, and I'll have to get a copy of that. Back of the binder, thank you very much. Okay, are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none and welcoming everyone. And may I please have a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting of March 27th? Yes, Madam Chair.
Someone to approve the agenda?
Yes, sorry, that's what I'm doing. Oh, no, that's not what it says. Okay, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. And now may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March 27th meeting that's before us. Sorry. And that'll be, we need an electronic vote to approve the agenda? Yes, please. Thank you. Go ahead. Okay. And I see two dates here, Madam Clerk. You've got March 27th and February 27th. Are they two meeting dates? Yes. February 27th. So may I please have a motion to approve the previous minutes of the February 27th meeting? Moved by Councillor, were you here at that? Just make sure it's got to be someone that was here. Yes, Councillor Vanderbeek moves it. Councillor Danko seconds. All in favor? Electronic vote. Thank you, everyone. And the items of communication today, we have item 5.1, which is correspondence from Hamilton Builders Society of Architects respecting site plan approval system proposed improvements report. The recommendation here is to receive, but I understand Kyle is present and wishes to make a delegation request. What's the wish of committee? Okay, so when we deal with this item then? Thank you. Okay, so then to receive the item correspondence, moved by Councillor Whitehead, second by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. That was just a show of hands as received. Okay. Consent items then. We have before us 7.1 is continuous improvement team process review, water and sewer permits for new single-family, two-family, and townhouse developments. It's case number 23. Are there any questions or comments regarding this? Seeing none, may I have a motion to receive? Moved by Councillor Farr, second by Mayor Eisenberg. Okay. All in favor? It's just to receive, show of hands. Thank you, everyone. 7.2 is Building Division Key Performance Indicators, KPI, and Dashboards, Building Division Dashboard and Plan Examination Performance Dashboard, case number 24. Any questions or comments with regards to this report? Seeing none, again, I have a motion to receive, moved by Councillor Danko, second by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor? Thank you, and I want to thank staff, obviously doing a great job. Thank you. Item 7.3 is continuous improvement team process review, zoning review of tents and temporary structures for building permits, case number 25. Any questions or comments with regards to item 7.3? Seeing none, again, may I please have a motion to receive that report? Moved by Councillor Whitehead, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. And item 7.4 is continuous improvement team site plan waivers. This is case number 26. Again, report before you. A lot of great reading this past weekend. Any questions or comments with regards to this? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Whitehead, second by Councillor Farr. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. I have next, we're moving on to staff presentations. Binu Kora, Manager of Engineering Approvals, is here with a presentation regarding construction management plan. And that's before us. Binu, come on down. This is to this, no. Questions on? We haven't had the presentation yet. Thank you. Come on down, Binu. And everybody has the presentation before them.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, actually, for allowing the opportunity to present the concession management plan. My name is Binu Kora. I am manager of development approvals with economic development. With growth management, planning, and economic development. So today, actually, we would like to present the concession management plan. There are three components, actually, we would like to discuss. Number one, we would like to discuss about the construction details, and we would like to discuss about the traffic management plan, and also the third component, I would like to talk about the public communication plan. I just wanted to highlight a couple of points here. The concession management plan is not new to the city. If you look at the site plan conditions, there are two components actually the applicant actually has to submit. One is the foundation design drawings, and also the concession management plan, and that consolidating at the moment, actually we're thinking to consolidate all the requirements into a concession management plan to facilitate the construction faster and the approval process faster. That is why we are actually coming in front of the DILG, and we had a meeting with the DILG last year, and we did actually, we did the presentation to DILG a couple of times. So if you look at the concession management plan, the concession details itself, there are a couple of points actually we would like to discuss with you. Number one, the surface encroachment. What is meant by surface encroachment? There are two components actually we would like to discuss. One is the encroachment to city right-of-way, and secondly to the private properties. Then I would like to present on the shoring, tiebacks, and pile construction. What is actually required the applicant actually has to submit to the city. Then we would like to talk about the storage and loading areas, hoarding and safety fencing, and we will discuss about aerial and crane encroachments, and soil management plan including dust control, and also we would like to talk about the restoration plan including landscaping plan. So I just wanted to give an example of the surface encroachment. If you look at this map, you could see all three sides of this property surrounded by the city roads, and also to the, so I'm just going to say this is north, and the east side of the property, you can see there is private properties. So what we can see actually from this drawing, the applicant is proposing the caisson walls, and also they are doing an excavation within the city right-of-way. So in order for them to do the surface encroachment, I just wanted to show you the next slide. Actually, if you look at, the applicant actually has to submit a drawing with different cross sections. So, and then they have to articulate how they actually going to construct this building. So if you look at actually this caisson, pile, and tiebacks, in this particular to this project, you can see that the applicant is actually proposing to install a caisson wall. So this is the caisson wall, and this is the foundation wall. They are proposing to have 4 underground parking, and this is about 25-story building. And let's look at actually what is the impact and how we can address the impacts to the city right-of-way and the neighboring properties. So if you look at actually on this line, you can see that is called the tiebacks. The applicant is actually proposing a tiebacks to the city right-of-way to the private properties. There are, see, if you look at this block, that is the city infrastructure such as water, sanitary, storm, and so on. And the utilities, actually the blue dots actually shows the utilities within the right-of-way. So we are actually asking the applicant to demonstrate, first of all, actually city may not actually support the installation of the tiebacks within the right-of-way. They have to identify all the alternatives to see whether actually they can construct the building within the right-of-way without impacting the city right-of-way. So if there is no alternatives, they could actually come up with a design, it's called a shoring, and the tiebacks. They can look at actually how they can implement this. So in order for them to actually give us, construct the tiebacks, we are asking them to provide us where the locates are, where the utilities actually within the right of way. They also has to demonstrate us where the city infrastructures, we have the as-built drawings. The applicant actually can obtain the as-built drawings, and they have to demonstrate us the clearance between the city, between the storm sewers and the sanitary sewers, and also they have to exactly locate where these infrastructures are. And one of the applications is also proposing the tiebacks to a private properties. So you can see actually here, this is the existing building, and this is their foundation. They are going underneath the foundation with the tiebacks. So as a city, we are actually requesting the applicant to obtain the approval actually from the neighboring property owners and a legal agreement with the property owners. They can do the tiebacks and have an impact to the private properties. So I just wanted to talk about what is meant by tiebacks. The tiebacks actually always, if you look at in major cities as New York, Boston, Toronto, and these are the major cities, the land is precious, so that the developer actually wanted to make advantage of the tiebacks so that they can reduce the cost to construct the foundation and the underground parking. So in order for them to do that, actually they propose the tiebacks first. Actually, before actually they start any construction, they install the caisson walls all around the perimeters, and then they actually start excavating it. So one of the conditions actually for city also, they have to do a record of site condition. Without actually having a proper shoring plan in place, they cannot actually do the excavation. So as such, they have to come up with a different type of shoring methods to support their construction. So if you look at actually this map, you can see this is actually called the different type of shoring actually they can propose. Say for example, actually if this is a caisson wall or a sheet pile, they are driving into the ground, they actually have to drill a hole through the surrounding land or to the city right away. Then they install the steel and they install the grout, and they tie with a thread actually to hold the tiebacks. Hold the caisson wall or whatever the method actually they are using. Basically, technically speaking, actually they are just holding the caissons into the soil. So basically, in order for them to do that, as a city, actually, we are asking them to provide us with a geotechnical report, because it is very important that when they install the tiebacks, we don't want actually it's impacting the city infrastructures. Number two, if they are actually doing the tiebacks, we are asking them to do a CCTV through the pipes to make sure that the precondition survey there is no impact to the city infrastructures. So this is actually, I just want to show you a couple of photos. Actually, I took actually these photos actually from Google. You can see the green dots. These are the tiebacks installed. So basically, this is the way actually. This is a wood lagging with a shoring. So this is the way actually they are proposing to do the excavation. Then the shoring and caisson piling, as I indicated, there are a couple of impacts. When they do the shoring, it may have vibration to neighboring properties. So we are asking the applicant to submit a vibration analysis and a noise report. We have a city actually has a bylaw for the noise, and they have to make sure they are not exceeding our bylaw. The DBA, it's proposed in the noise bylaw. As I indicated earlier, they are also has to submit the precondition survey for the existing building and existing infrastructures such as water, storm, sanitary, and other utilities. So you could see that in this picture, there are tiebacks actually installed to the neighboring properties. And especially I wanted to talk about the deep excavation and caisson piling. In this picture, actually, you can see that there are tiebacks to the neighboring properties, and this is a city road. They actually have the tiebacks, and especially they have to build a ramp to do the excavation within this pit. So it is actually very important that as a city, actually, we have to make sure they have a mud mat in place or a washing bay in place within the access so that city street is actually going to not get dirty, and they have to make sure they continue to do the street cleaning. No impact to the dust migration is an issue, so that all has to be dealt with. And another component actually here is to make sure that no impact to the surrounding properties. The neighboring properties, especially the dust mitigation plan, has to be dealt with. So another one of the major component I wanted to discuss about the hydrogeologic study. You can see from this picture, one of the projects actually we are dealing at the moment is the water table is actually, this red line indicate the water table. That is about, so the applicant is actually proposing about 2 underground parking below the water table. What that means is they have to lower the water table in order to construct the raft foundation and also the slab. So it is actually very important that we have to make sure the applicant submit a hydrogeologic studies to understand how they actually going to do the dewatering. Especially in this case, actually they are proposing the caisson wall. That means all 4 sides of the property is actually going to be a caisson wall. They trapping the water actually within that block, so that actually they can pump the water into the city system or somewhere actually they have to outlet. So as in accordance with our policies, the developer actually has to submit a discharge permit. They have to get the discharge permit. If it is more than 50,000 liters actually they are pumping, they also have to get the ministry approvals. So that is one of the challenge through the process the developer actually has to undertake. So this is dewatering, actually how the dewatering is done. In this case, what they are proposing is actually they have different well systems. So they are pumping, so this is the motor actually sitting at that corner. So they are actually pumping into, from the well, they are actually pumping into the city sewer. So this is the way the dewatering is done. And especially for a city, actually we have to make sure we have a combined sewer system and there is no downstream impacts. So the flow actually has to be controlled in a different manner before actually they are discharging to the city. So the next item I would like to talk about the storage and loading area. You can see from this picture, it's actually the whole site is completely occupied. So it's very difficult to identify the storage location within the site. So as part of the site plan process, as part of the construction management plan process, the applicant actually has to demonstrate us where actually it's going to be their storage and loading areas. And you can also see from here the cranes. The buildings are very close, and they have to make sure they have the aerial rights and there is no impact to the surrounding properties. And also, if they are flying heavy objects through the private properties or through the top of the city road, we have to make sure there is no impact to the public. So in some of the instances, actually, people are also, the developers are also proposing the soil cells. Especially, within the city environment, the trees are very nice, and how that is actually planted. So always actually, in some instance, they are proposing the silver cells. As we all know, it is actually very important that the utilities actually is within the boulevard. So when they place the silver cells, we have to make sure that all the utilities, if you look at the, especially actually this side, you can see that all the utilities are actually going inside the silver cells. So there are lots of coordination actually it's required. Various departments in a city actually working together to implement all required to support the development. So the next major component, actually, I would like to discuss about the traffic management plan. As part of the traffic management plan, one of the important aspects for the development is they have to make sure they have to demonstrate where actually they're going to access the site. They also have to make sure the detour plans. They have to make sure there is no neighborhood impacts. The pedestrian movements actually has to be taken into account through for the traffic management plan. Then there are several city projects are actually going on. So the developer actually has to make sure there is no impact to our business and the residents. Then especially when they are relocating the sidewalks, they have to make sure they are properly actually designed so that the street lights and everything can be provided so it can be a safe passage. Then one of the important aspects actually is brought by a couple of residents, the parking management plan. Especially as we all know, these high-rises actually take 2 to 3 years to build, and all the workers actually take off all the parking, then the business is actually going to die. So as part of this process, we are asking the developer to demonstrate where the workers actually is going to park so that actually we can support our business within that area. Then the signage and the safety measures, lane closures, they have to show us the duration of construction so that actually we can implement accordingly. So if you look at actually here, one of the projects, they are requesting to close the road and also to relocate the sidewalks. So we are making sure that they provide us a consolidated plan so that every section can review and provide comments accordingly. So as I indicated earlier, if you look at actually this map, I'm sorry for the clarity of the map, but the main intent is to make sure that there are lots of construction is going on within the city. And we have only certain arterial roads. So we need to make sure that we coordinating all the road closures and all the traffic movements, heavy truck routes, and all the components actually can be managed through this traffic management plan and detour plans. So, and especially actually if you are closing the sidewalk or protecting the sidewalks, we have to make sure there is an overhead sidewalk protection actually it's required, and that has to be certified by an engineer so that the public can be safely actually walk through this overhead protection. Overhead protection. So then the next major thing actually I would like to talk about the communication plan. It is actually very important that the ward councillor be informed what is actually going on within that area so that they can understand, they can facilitate, they will get calls from the residents so that they can answer. So as part of the construction management plan, we are asking the developer to provide the details and consult with the ward councillor. Then they also have to send the notification to the business community and the residents. We are also requesting them prior to start of any construction, set up a pre-construction meeting so that our construction section can be top of all the issues. Then send notification to emergency response, fire, police, ambulance, and transits. And also we are requesting the developers to build a website so that everyone can go and see the construction staging and what is the current news with regards to the development. Then the working hours, always we have a working hours as per the city standards. But if there is any difference in that working hours, they have to inform us. And at last, they have to make sure they provide a detailed construction schedule so that we understand and we can answer the questions to public and the councillors appropriately. So for conclusion of my presentation, the construction management plan consists of all the things actually I indicated. I just wanted to give you highlights. The construction details include precondition survey. They have to submit the utility plan, excavation plan, storage and loading areas, and the crane location. Secondly, they have to make sure they have the vibration and a noise report, hydrogeologic studies, and geotechnical studies to make sure that there is no settlement, there is no impact to surrounding lands and the city right away. The traffic management plan we talked about, the traffic management plan provide a comprehensive plan how the traffic can move traffic plan can be adjusted to accommodate this development. Then the utility relocation, if they are impacting the street lights, any utilities, they have to make sure actually they provide the utility and the protection plans. So in the end, all of this, they have to enter into a shoring agreement so that we have the letter of credit and we have the insurance so that the development can proceed smoothly. So that's all in my presentation. Any questions?
Venu, thank you. That was excellent. Certainly gave an awful lot of information and a few slides of what staff have to deal with and with the development industry out there. I do have a speakers list. Questions? Councillor Farr?
Thank you, Binu, through you, Chair, to the construction management plan slide. Sorry, not that one. Sorry, just about 6 slides back. The traffic management slide, sorry. So you talked a lot about, pedestrians, and, I've taken a bit of heat when we have major developments happening and we close a sidewalk rightly. I take heat and staff take heat. We would love to, each and every development, maintain the sidewalks both sides of the street, and it hasn't always been the case. I think we're better at it now. I think, we can get better at it, but folks don't know the effort because it just sort of happens. Platinum at the corner of King and Queen, for example, might not have had, it might have had a sidewalk closure. We even did pedestrian counts at peak periods. It was something like 16 people using that sidewalk. Could have closed it, but instead, thanks to people engaging in the community, we thought in the construction management plan, keep it open. And that's the first time publicly people have learned that. We could have gone the other way. So it's incumbent upon us to, as you rightly note, to do our very best on the sidewalks. But you haven't mentioned cycling at all. So where in the construction management plan are we, especially if it's along a bike lane, how is that a part of the process in the construction management plan through you, Chair?
As part of the, if you look at actually this drawing, as part of the overall traffic management plan, the Public Works is actually looking at the cycling and the sidewalk closures. So they will actually make sure that all the cycling and the sidewalk analysis is done, and they will be appropriately directed to address that issue. So Tony actually has something to add.
Councillor Vanderbeek.
Didn't I? No? Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the councillor, it's a great question. When they review these traffic management plans, it's for all modes of traffic. Binu didn't mention HSR is a big issue as we have to deal with it because the detours can be extensive. So they are looking at that. One previous project, concerns came up on the Cannon Street in terms of the use of the bike lanes. And we made exerted efforts for the developer to maintain access to those facilities during the duration of the construction. So where you can, you want to try to maintain all those public elements as being the first line of our position as it. And then we have to look at the details as to the impacts and where we can compromise and where we can't.
Thank you, Tony. The other question was on this dewatering. Can you go to that slide, please, Binu? And then this is it for me. So I'm dealing in the older part of the city. We're getting these massive developments, and we're all happy for the jobs they create and the residents they bring and the vitality and so forth. But we're also dealing with combined sewer systems, Binu. So through you, Chair, you had touched on it here. It's the requirement of the proponent who's feeding into, on their land, in the development land, who's feeding into a combined sewer or a combined pipe, sewer water, to do what on their, they have to have 2 separate pipes, but if those 2 separate pipes are going into a combined, why can't the development also have a combined? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the main component is first actually they had to identify how much liter per second actually they're going to discharge. Our combined sewer system actually has a limited capacity. So whatever actually we assigned this to this development, they can actually discharge into the system. So normally what they do, actually they pump the water from the ground. It has a silt. So it goes to a tank. They controlled actually within the tank, and then they discharge to the combined sewer. So we are actually only concerned about how many liter per second they are discharging into the system.
So it all depends on, through you, Chair, what the system is on our right-of-way.
Correct. What system can take the capacity, that's all.
Okay, and then the only thing, this is on dewatering, but just on water in general, sewage and water. So again, in the older part of the city, we have, as an example right now, there's 46 units, towns going in a former infamous toxic property at Barton and Catherine. 5-story office building where there's now our last remaining exotic dance parlor. So a transformational project on an infamous parcel and a really truly onerous issue as it relates to the infrastructure feeding into ancient pipes on either, you could say, Catherine or John. Is that proponent, I understand the proponent is responsible to make sure if there's a capacity issue on the city side, that they need to change that to make it more up to code or larger for that project to work, correct? Through you, Chair, is that right? Or Tony?
Tony will take that question.
Through the chair, maybe I can take a quick shot at answering that question. The existing systems, no matter whether you're in the combined sewer system or the separate sewer system, when we designed the system was based on certain parameters. So in the downtown, what we've applied is in the combined sewer area, you control the discharge to the existing parameters, being a 2-year storm and the equivalent sanitary combination. So they have a choice of either building tanks on site like McMaster did across the street, and/or doing infrastructure upgrades within the corridor that there can be a storm relief to allow for capacities. So each case is, you have to look at on its own separate, what is the best way to proceed. In most of the cases, they choose to over-control on site to ensure that they are not causing any adverse impacts downstream. So I don't understand the specifics as it relates to the Barton and the Catherine Street, I believe it is that you said?
Yeah.
Because then you can look at which direction you're discharging to, because sometimes you can actually go to one of the side streets or onto Barton Street, depending on what system and the depth of the infrastructure that exists. So each one is looked at in a separate. What we try to do is ensure that there's no adverse impacts.
I understand that. In the older parts of the city, though, Tony, you'll admit, through you, Chair, there are unique challenges.
Through the chair to the councillor, unique is a very nice way of putting it, yes.
Why not in a case? You know what? I'm not gonna. I'm getting parochial, and I don't want to do that, and I want to keep the meeting moving. But I'll take Binu and Tony aside because it's an interesting story with this particular parcel because it's really an onerous cost, and it's 4 blocks of main line that needs to be replaced for a relatively small development on a line where we have nearly completed a forensic lab, a 30-story approval by John Rebecca Park, a CNEF proposal, and now just at the last planning meeting, my colleagues will remember John Van Nostrand talking about 3 possible other buildings, all along the same line, but one developer who happens to go first will be taking care of the infrastructure needs for all that major development. This is the dilemma I'm in on one stretch, but it's not for this committee, but I appreciate it, and I did want to get on the record that we do have these unique challenges in the older parts of the city that I think, we still need, it's a work in progress as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Binu, thank you very much for this presentation. It's obviously a very complex process to walk people through this for these major projects. My questions are around the shoring. My first question is, at what point, what is the benchmark for this shoring with tiebacks? I mean, in my experience, we've had everything from no shoring to major shoring. So if you can tell me what the benchmark is for this kind of shoring, I'd appreciate it.
So as sorry, through you, Madam Chair, as I indicated earlier, Councillor, as a city, actually, we don't like to see any shoring within the city right away. But in some instance, the applicants are actually proposing to have the shoring and tiebacks, because especially actually if they are going deeper, they have to support their shoring wall. That is why they are actually proposing the tiebacks. If there are options. One, actually they cannot actually build the building right to the property line. They need to actually have additional lands actually provided to do the shoring. So one of the ways the other municipalities are also approving in such a way, they are allowing the tiebacks. So the tiebacks is basically an instrument to hold the caisson wall. Once the tiebacks are installed, we are asking them to de-stress the tiebacks. So if you look at actually this map, this is the key actually holding this this wall, the tiebacks. So as soon as you de-stress, the next development actually comes on the side, or even the city actually go back and do the reconstruction of the road, we can cut these ties. It's not going to be an issue as long as if they de-stress. So this is why it's very important that we need to enter into a shoring agreement. If city is allowing the tiebacks, we need to make sure we have the shoring agreement in place so that we can take the letter of credit and we can make sure they de-stress the tiebacks. So that's actually not going to be an impact to the city or even to the neighboring properties. Especially for the neighboring properties, we are also asking for a legal agreement between both parties. Until such time, city actually cannot enter into this shoring agreement. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. And so through you, Madam Chair, so do these tiebacks stay in the ground? Are they there permanently?
It's going to be, yes, it's going to be permanently actually stayed in the ground. But as long as actually if the other developer actually comes and build, so in this case, I just want to go back to one slide here. So you can see actually the existing building. The tiebacks are actually going underneath the building. For example, this developer, this private property owner came back and he wanted to now go 5 or 6 story underground. This developer actually has to make sure he de-stress the tiebacks so that this property owner can cut these ties and he can rebuild. So there is no major implications. We are allowing the tiebacks, but the only thing is we have to make sure they have the appropriate agreement between the both parties. And as a city, actually, we need to make sure that the tiebacks are designed appropriately so that it's not going to have an impact to the existing property owners. That is entirely to the developer to make sure that there is any vibrations or any cracks actually within the existing building. That is their responsibility to make sure that there is no impacts.
So thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, I just want to go back to my original question because I'm not sure that you actually answered it, which was, what's the benchmark for this type of shoring? So is it the height of the building? Is it the depth they're going? Is it the proximity to infrastructure or a neighboring building? At what point would you insist on shoring with these tiebacks?
Normally, if they are actually building the properties right to the property line, and also if they are going deeper, say probably actually 2 or 3 story underground parking, they may need the tiebacks. Because if you look at actually this, this drawing, you can see that the deepest infrastructure within the road is the sanitary sewer. That is probably about 6 meters. So we are actually recommending minimum 3 meters below the tiebacks has to be. So that means it's about 9 meters, 30-degree angle. So normally, if the excavations are about 5 to 6 meters, roughly they need the tiebacks. So that is the threshold. Second thing is, if they are actually coming very close to the neighboring properties, that may have an impact. If they have a multiple stories underground, then they cannot use rakers. One way actually they can use is they can actually hold with the rakers inside, but that is only actually for probably about 1-story underground parking.
Thank you. If I have other questions, I'll carry on with it offline, but I just was interested in sort of the general, when do you use them and what happens to them? So you've answered that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There seems to be getting a lot of attention these days around shoring, certainly with the building on King Street at Queen and another one down on King William and King. H-beams and lagging, sheet piling, and caisson retaining walls have been around for decades and has been tried, tested, and true. Why is this suddenly a big issue when we've been doing this stuff for 50 years?
So at the moment, actually, we are asking for the developer actually to, if they are encroaching into the city right away, we would like to know what they are installing and how they installing. Especially actually, we have to make sure. I'm not sure actually previously how they did the foundation works. At the moment, actually, I can see the drawings actually they are proposing the tiebacks. They may be actually using different types of mechanism to construct the excavations. So at the moment, actually, they are proposing the tiebacks, and the tiebacks actually have an impact to city right away, and also to the private properties.
But you've had to use tiebacks for decades. Once you get below 4 meters, say, depending on the soil conditions and a proximity to another building or the road. Is there a change to the Ontario Building Code to require permits of shoring now that we didn't have before? I'm just wondering why this has suddenly become a big issue and we've been doing it for decades.
I'll refer to it.
Mr. Vanderwyn, Ed?
Through the chair to the councillor. Just a little bit of background on the building code portion. This structure is actually called a excavation in soil rock retaining structure. It's been in the code since 1986. It's been there for a long time, and it's under the building code. Typically, buildings in our downtown have gone down 1 story, and we are into a new era. We're digging now 2, 3, 4 stories below grade, and that's when these tiebacks really kick in. So it's somewhat new to Hamilton. We've seen some before, but now we're getting them on a regular basis because people are building out to the property line, which is right against the sidewalk on the street.
So this is initiated by the city, not by the Ontario Building Code, because in Toronto, they've been doing this type of shoring for a long time.
Yes, so the building code has always required permits for these structures. And just to help out with Councillor Vanderbeek's comment earlier, what triggers this? When there's an investigation done on the soils for a property, and I'll just give you some of the parameters that they look for, but they look at the subsurface investigation, they look at the depth of the foundation, look at the sloping ground, eccentric and incline loads, dynamic loading, hydrostatic uplift, groundwater level change, swelling and drinking soils, expanding and deteriorating rock, construction on the fill, and the actual structural design of the shoring itself. There's a number of parameters in that structure that needs to be looked at to prevent the neighboring building or street from collapsing. It's not just as simple as a certain height. But aside from that, any retaining wall that's over 1 meter in height requires a design under the building code.
Okay, so Ed, you're saying that there's been no change in the Ontario Building Code. It's because we haven't seen deep excavations in a heavy urban area for a while is why it's suddenly becoming an issue?
In part, that's correct. The other part is that we have been traditionally also having foundations installed solely on the property, and tiebacks have not been used to go underneath neighboring buildings. But now we're having property owners who want to build next to the property line with deeper foundations. That requires negotiation with the city or the neighboring property owner to do the tiebacks.
Okay, because the Police Investigative Services building simply had a trench box filled full of sand, and then the excavator down beside it. That was the shoring they used. But only in these last 2 is where you're issuing stop work orders and slowing the project down, I'm sure for good reason, for health and safety reasons. But so you're saying there's nothing new, Ed, in the Ontario Building Code that's triggered these? It's just that we haven't experienced a lot of them in Hamilton before.
In the Ontario Building Code, there's nothing new. The police services building, it was all on their own site. They could do it all within their own system. Now they're excavating beyond the property line. So we have encroachment agreements involved. We have hydro-G studies involved because of the water table levels, because of the deeper foundations.
Okay, and those tiebacks, they eventually get cut off. They're just abandoned there because you can't get them out once the building is up. Is that correct?
Yes, they must be what we call de-stressed, as Binu just described, so that when they get cut off, they don't cause damage or injury to anybody else.
Because you can't get them out because the building's up beside them now.
Yeah, you don't want to disturb the soil any further.
Right. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I also wanted to add one more point. If you look at the City of Toronto has a detailed shoring process. They have a shoring agreement. They actually gone through all the detailed evaluation before actually they provide the approvals.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So let me understand this in layman's terms. The only time you really need the tiebacks is when you're actually building the wall. When that unit's completed, the need for the tiebacks become irrelevant at that point?
That's correct.
So it's a temporary fix to stabilize the wall for the balance of the construction.
That's correct.
What's the length? I didn't catch the length, traditional length of these tiebacks.
Through you, Madam Chair, the length is actually calculated based on the soil stability, and they have to analyze how many meter length of tiebacks is required. That is all depend on the soil characteristics. And they have to identify if it is a rock, if it is what type of soil actually they have before actually they install the tiebacks.
Okay, but I mean, you're not going to have a 2-foot tieback because it's not going to do anything. So there's got to be some formula ratio relative to the size of the wall, soil conditions, and depth that would determine the length. So I'm just trying to understand what would the range, how's that? What would the range be typically for these tiebacks as far as length?
Typically, I see about from 7 meters to 14 meters.
Okay. And what angle do they usually go at from the
Normally
wall?
30-degree angle.
30-degree angle?
Yes. So these are the tiebacks actually in this particular case. So what they did actually, they installed the piles, then they actually have the tiebacks. These are the wood lagging. So basically, first actually they install all these caisson wall all around the perimeters. Then they start excavating it. So as soon as actually they start certain levels, they start the tiebacks. So that's the way actually they can excavate. As you said, it's a temporary measures to do the excavation.
It reminds me underground when they call it rock bolting. They had 16-foot rock bolts to help stabilize the surface. So this is just stabilizing the wall. So then clearly then after built out, that's why you can de-stress the tiebacks because they're no longer relevant at that point.
Correct. So in this case, as if you look at this map, this is the wall actually they in placed. Plus, when they bring the foundation wall, they de-stress each tiebacks. So it's easy to do that.
Now, is it automatically assumed then that in all these situations relative to the depth, that the tiebacks are always going to be below all our infrastructure, like water, sewer, utilities, always automatically be below those infrastructures?
Yes, as part of the process, the engineering review process, we are actually asking them to delete all the utilities and the city infrastructures. So based on that, we are asking they have to go minimum 3 meters below the lowest infrastructure within the road.
Okay, so what is the typical depth that the first tieback would be required?
So that's all depend on the structural design. What I seen actually in the engineering drawings is probably about 3 to 4 meter deep. The first tiebacks in 30-degree angle actually comes in. So I would say earlier I said 5 to 6 meters. That's a typical
So it's
depth.
safely assume then that majority of the needs for the tiebacks when you see these plans come in would not be undermining the integrity of our infrastructure issues because they're well above that depth.
That's correct, Councillor. I believe as part of the process, we are also asking the developer to do a CCTV on the infrastructure. That is the precondition survey actually for the road and the above ground and underground. As soon as actually they complete all the work, we ask them to do a post-condition survey to make sure that there is no cracks, there is no impact to our infrastructures.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Kyle Sloat?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Binu, could you just clarify where in the approvals process the construction management plan comes in with respect to site plan approval, building permit, and any sort of approvals timelines that are associated with it?
It's a very good question. Through you, Madam Chair. The first part actually in the any development approval process is the site plan conditional approval. As part of the conditional approval, there is a condition actually the developer has to undertake. At the moment, if you look at the site plan conditions, this is actually basically prior to applying for the building permit, they have to make sure that they provide a foundation drawings to the engineering section to circulate to different department to make sure that there is, we need to understand the impacts. What are the impacts to the right-of-way, neighboring properties, and so on. So basically prior to applying for the building permit.
So from the point of view of us as architects, there's a bit of a challenge with submitting that prior to building permit application. I can understand prior to building permit issuance that it of course has to be sorted out, but for the life of the project and where it's at during site plan approval, it's asking projects to jump quite far ahead to get the foundations completely sorted out at a fairly premature stage of the project. Do you see any ability for that to be shifted to be a condition prior to building permit issuance?
Jason, wanted to answer.
Yes, through the chair, I'm actually going to ask Ed to respond, because this is actually one of the very issues we were looking at as part of the Open for Business initiative, is recognizing that in some cases this kind of work might need to happen as they're doing site preparation to prepare for a record of site condition. They may not be ready for the foundation permit application yet, which is why we started to look at whether we could go, have a shoring permit process. But I'll let Ed speak to that.
Through the chair to Kyle, thank you for the question. Traditionally, any work on the site requires site plan approval, and that, as we know, takes time. This process took the shoring permit out of that process and allowed us to do that process before site plan approval. So it was a way to help the industry move ahead with site works on the property without going through the entire site plan approval process. So although it may appear like a new thing, it was actually done to help expedite the site work on site prior to the site plan approval process being completed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. Just a couple quick questions, hopefully. My first was a comment, actually. The soil cells, I really appreciate you including that. I think that's I've heard great things about them, and I think it's really required to mitigate the stresses from the reduction in stormwater management. So my questions are, is this for all new builds? Is the construction management plan only for those builds that need shoring, or is it for all new builds? And do we have estimates of the cost and time implications for developers?
So the construction management plan, as I indicated, there are three components. One is the construction details, traffic management plan, and communication plan. The traffic management plan is actually required for any construction that is actually cleared by the Public Works Department. That is a requirement at the moment. Then we are actually looking at the communication plan. Communication plan is also very important in the aspect that we have to inform our ward councillor. Secondly, actually we need to inform the business surrounded by that development. So we don't need for all the developments, especially actually if you are impacting the city right-of-way and the neighboring properties, we need to make sure that we are entering into a shoring agreement to reduce the impacts, and especially between the commitment between the city and the developer has to be highlighted in the agreement. Tony actually wanted to add, I believe.
through the chair to the question. The short answer is, it depends on the scale and the scope. So where you have a lot of site plans that are coming through that were blocks within a development, most of the stuff has already been covered through the original development approvals and things like that. So you look at everything realistically. Where you have confined spots, where you have a lot of activity, we have a lot of concerns that are raised as part of any planning approval, especially related to vibration to existing heritage buildings. When the approvals were done for the former Connolly building, the historic church next door came in. And so we want to make sure that we put the various conditions for the situation that comes forward. A lot of these are private matters as it relates to the applicant. We're more concerned about the public realm and the public safety and the impacts around the adjacent area. So in the case of the downtown, as they suggested, you could have multiple projects going concurrently along with city projects. You need a traffic management plan, and you need to understand the duration. The noise and dust is always going to be an issue. They're covered by the Ministry of the Environment as well. We just want to make sure everybody's front and center on those. And the restoration, if you are going to encroach within the public realm, that's covered, and we look at it very holistically. So each case may be more comprehensive, and some may not.
Okay. Matt Johnston?
No questions, just a comment I wanted to relay and just to commend the new Tony and Ed on their hard work on this. This was a good example of how the Development Industry Liaison Group and city staff have been working together over the years. This is not the first time this presentation has been made, and it was one where I think we were both learning from each other in terms of what the issues are at play. And the end result is a good way to concisely formalize something that needs to be done, and it really is a good example of how the groups can work well together to get to points like this. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. With that, may I please have a motion to receive the presentation by Binu Excellent again, moved by Councillor Whitehead, second by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Carried. And before we close, I'm just going to turn back to Kyle. You had your correspondence item 5.1. You want to make a comment, if I'm correct? So please go ahead. This is the item we received today from the Hamilton Burlington Society of Architects on our agenda. Go ahead.
Great. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate that this committee received this report and this letter today from the Hamilton Burlington Society of Architects and the Ontario Association of Architects. I just wanted to speak to some of the main key points of this letter, just to highlight why it's so important to our members. The OAA, the Ontario Association, commissioned a study at the cost to Ontario's economy of the site plan approval process. This is an important and a necessary process that they conservatively estimated cost the Ontario economy approximately $900 million a year. As a sort of back of napkin calculation, if Hamilton is approximately 5% of the province's population, that's $45 to $50 million costing Hamilton's economy. It is a necessary process. What our members are interested in is how it can be made more streamlined and more effective so that it achieves what it's meant to achieve, meaning that it deals with the technical requirements of planning a site in a way that is keeping public interest in mind without hampering projects and bogging them down in a regulatory process that can often exceed the total length of the entire project. We looked at a couple examples in our office and discovered that the site plan process, the length of time it took, actually equaled every other phase of the project. That includes design, technical drawings, tendering, the permitting process, and actual construction. So our members are of the opinion that this is a disproportionate amount of time for this process to take. And we would like to ask this committee or any other appropriate body or process how we can move forward to streamline the process. There are a number of recommendations within the report that I hope, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at yet, that you will take a look at. A lot of them are related to timelines, requesting that we enforce the Planning Act's requirement for a decision to be made on site plan applications within 30 days. Further to that, if approval is not granted within those 30 days and there's additional information or comments required, that timelines be assigned to responses to those additional comments and requirements once submitted, that new requirements not be added beyond that initial commenting stage. These sorts of things that will allow us to go back to our clients so that it's a predictable process, so that we can say, you'll hear this information within 30 days. Depending on what we hear from then, we should have things wrapped up in another 30 days. So through you, Madam Chair, we thank you for accepting this report and are open to whatever recommendations or advice others here might have to move this forward and to effect some change. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. Since they took the time to write the letter, I think it's appropriate that we at some point respond to that, maybe kind of verbally today in terms of where we've been at through our kind of redefining our processes going forward, all of them, including site plans. So update right now in terms of what we've done and what we are working on in terms of site plan improvements. Jason?
Yeah, so through the chair, so certainly staff's been aware of the OAA work for some time. It's not new information. I should be upfront in saying that I think we don't agree with some of I don't agree with some of the findings and conclusions that are drawn in the OAA report, but it's certainly always good information to have. And the one thing I would agree with is that the faster an approval process can be, the better. And we do try to streamline as much we can. We do have sort of a standing opportunity through the Development Industry Liaison Group that and the architect sits on that of course if there is a best practice somewhere that we are not doing, that we could be doing, we're always more than happy to take a look at it and see what any sorts of efficiencies we can find. I would say that if you look at the OAA report, they're kind of looking provincially at some of the timelines, and we actually stack up pretty well against the comparators. They're talking, we had a report out of a group called ResCon last year that suggested there was an average 2-year timeline for site plan in the, I believe that was in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. And we have something like, we generally tell people you can expect to have your final approval all the way to building permit within 6 to 12 months, so significantly faster than the 24 months. I know that planning had done some analysis. When we issue site plan approval, it's good for a year. And we will offer an extension if you don't get to your building permit within that year. And it's very rare. In the last couple of years, we had about 7% of our site plans actually required that extension. So I think our timelines stack up well against other municipalities. Not to say that we won't always look at approved processes. So some of the recommendations, not contained in this letter, but in some of the earlier work, talked about delegating site plan approval authority to staff, which some municipalities don't do, but this municipality already has. And looking at opportunities for concurrent reviews, again, which this municipality has already done, but always open to look at other ways that we can make this process more efficient.
Appreciate that. So is it your intention to respond to the letter? I mean, I think you should. I mean, we've kind of been at this now for 6 years, I think, Open for Business Committee, and kind of collective work to try and streamline the process in every sector, site plan included. So is it your intention to respond to this letter? And
through the chair, we certainly can. Like I said, there's not a whole lot new in here. A lot of this information has been out for a while, and we've certainly had conversations through the liaison group on some of the specifics. But we can provide sort of a general response to some of the issues that were raised and identify some of the improvements that we've made and send that back to the HBSA. And like I said, there is that standing opportunity. That's one of the reasons why the liaison group exists, is if there's other practices out there we should be taking a look at that may be better than our own. We're happy to do that. Some of the items you had on the agenda today come from those sorts of conversations about asking us to take a look at a certain process or at a certain best practice.
Thank you. So one of the things that we talked about a while ago is to have on the agenda, kind of on a regular basis, kind of the listing of things that of changes we've made in the process to date. I didn't see it on this one. I'm not sure it needs to be at every one, but it certainly would be helpful to remind all of how far we've come. And yes, we could argue there's always more to do. Of course there is, and that's why we're still working collectively on that process. So is that something you can continue to provide on the agenda? So just kind of to add the add-on list as to process changes we made recently, and then add it on to what we've done over the last 4 years, let's say.
Yes, through the chair, we can certainly add that to the next agenda as an information item. I think case study number 26, I think, was the one, the latest one that was on today's agenda, so that's the number we're up to.
Great.
But we can include a running list
great.
at the next meeting.
Thank you. You know what, and I'm hopeful that we're going to stay collectively constructive to work towards, solutions on issues that are concerned to all of us. And I think we all agree that we need to continuously look to improvements. But there are, at some point, there's going to be some limit to that as well. So, time constraints and staffing issues start to come into play. And so, we'd like to have the approvals happen yesterday, but there are things that need to happen to make sure they're done properly and safely. So I appreciate the architect's input, and I think it would be helpful for us to respond to them in a clear, concise way, and continue to work on making sure that we have a open for business process that is collaborative and working together to look for those common solutions. I think that's critically important. And that's certainly been the history so far, and certainly something we'd like to continue on with until such time as we've done what we think everything that we can do. I'm not sure there's an end game to this, but I think at some point, how far do we go before we start tripping into other issues that might be impactful? So I appreciate the input, and hopefully we'll stay constructive.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you to staff, just on the site plan approval process, the letter brought up a couple questions that I had bouncing around in my head. We receive site plan approvals for development that have components that are not in line with the zoning on a certain property. Is that correct?
Through the chair, if I understand the question correctly, we will sometimes receive a site plan application that requires a minor variance as well. And so that minor variance becomes one of the conditions that has to be met before you can get your site plan approval.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we're talking about timelines for approvals of site plans, and what would the timelines look like for an application site plan approval that was 100% in line with zoning, didn't require any minor variances, versus a site plan approval that had a whole shopping list of variances required? Is there a difference in the timeline and in the level of effort for those two applications?
Through the chair, I'll let Steve speak to the timeline. I do just want to note, just because it was one of the open for business improvements we've made, that prior to this committee being formed, those actually used to be sequential requirements. We'd require you to get your minor variance approved before you did your site plan. And we actually amended that so they can happen concurrently, which saves some time because you can have multiple processes happening at the same time. But I'll let Steve reply to the timeline issue.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the councillor. Essentially, the processing times would be roughly the same in the sense as Mr. Thorne indicated. We will accept the application, we will review the application, then we issue conditional approval within 4 to 6 weeks from the date of receiving a complete application. Depending on the nature of the variances, then the applicant can then proceed to go to the Committee of Adjustment and apply for those variances. And very often, simultaneously, while they're working their way through that Committee of Adjustment minor variance process, that's when they'll be working on their engineering submissions, their landscape plans, and the other elements that need to be addressed, with the goal that both the timing for the completion of the minor variance route, which can take 90 days, will sort of align with the timing of them getting engineering approvals and all the other approvals. So it all comes together at the same point in time, rather than delaying the process. What we do as staff, though, we have to be comfortable with those variances. If they're variances that we can support, then they get imposed as a condition of the site plan approval, and that makes it easier. If they're variances that staff cannot support and it would trigger a redesign of the proposal, then we will wait until that variance process plays out before issuing any conditional approval, because staff do not want to signal to the applicant that by approving the site plan subject to them getting variances, that it's automatic that staff will be able to recommend to the Committee of Adjustment approval of those variances.
So in terms of the timeline, so you have two concurrent processes, but it would seem to me that a development or a site plan approval that has a number of complex minor variances would take considerable more time from staffing and our workload, would it not?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. It can be, depending on the nature of those variances. If there's a series of, and at some point in time, though, it may be that the proposal is so far off base, we just can't support it, and it may actually trigger the need to go through a rezoning before we deal with it, because it's not. But if it is a very complex variance process, then obviously that takes more staff time to process and to deal with. We try to generally, discourage applicants from having a lot of minor variances because often the zoning bylaw represents a translation of the official plan in terms of what the city's standards and requirements are. And it's for those reasons that we discourage people from applying for applications that completely deviate from the zoning bylaw in terms of the performance standards, and other factors and considerations. We were having situations where we were in the transition between the new commercial and the old commercial zoning. So people were seeking to take advantage of the new commercial zoning permissions through a minor variance process while we were waiting for a decision of the LPAT to proclaim the new commercial zoning into force and effect. And that's why sometimes we saw these applications coming forward that might need essentially 10 or 15 variances, but that was because of the translation of the old commercial zoning into the new commercial zoning would result in a minor variance application. When you would see the public notice, it might be 2 pages long. It was simply because of all of those difference in those technical requirements between the old zoning bylaw and the new zoning bylaw. But as you may also recall, during the fee debate, we wanted to make sure that on the non-single-family homeowner variance applications, that our fees do reflect the cost for the city to process a complex commercial, industrial, or mixed-use zoning minor variance type application. And we work on that basis of recovering our costs, which reflect the amount of staff time to process either a complicated site plan application and/or a complicated variance application.
Good, thank you for that. So just when we're talking about timelines, obviously the goal is to get those as quickly as possible, but in some cases, there's pretty good reasons why things take time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And finally, Ed Fothergill.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I agree. I think a staff response to these comments would be helpful. There are a lot of details in the submission. Staff may not agree with all of them, but they may agree on some. So I think it's worth the time having a look at that. And this may also allow other people to have input to this issue as well. I'll go back and talk to my friends at the chamber to see whether we want to make a submission on the architect's proposal. There may be input from home builders on this as well, I don't know. But I think we should open up this discussion a little bit. Whether it comes back to DILG or here, to me it doesn't matter too much. DILG is a really good forum for talking about these things. So I'm happy to deal with it maybe through there first, even if it takes more than one meeting, and then come back to this group later. But I think it's worth some discussion. There have been a lot of improvements on a site plan. In my experience in my business, the first part of the process works really well. The second part, I think we maybe need to tighten up a little bit. So we have made changes, but I don't think that stops us from going forward and trying to have a good system maybe work that much better. And I think there are some good ideas here that we can, if we can make work, I think will be helpful.
Excellent, thank you. And thanks, Kyle, for bringing this discussion forward, and great answers from staff as well, and a good debate that is about to wrap up with our final speaker, Councillor Terry Whitehead.
Actually move a motion. So I'm moving direction, actually, so through a motion. That staff be directed to respond to each of those items that's been identified in the letter today. Not only forward to the appropriate committees, but certainly make sure that each member of this committee gets a response.
Okay.
Second by Mr. Fothergill.
Okay, well, the mayor already received a response that you were going to do that, Jay, but if you want to formalize it, that's all in favor? Any opposed? Or we got to do it electronically?
The official advisors are not voting members, so if you want to find a seconder in one of the councillors.
All in favor? We need to electronically vote on this, Lauren. That's moved by Mayor Fred, seconded by Councillor Terry Whitehead. It's unanimous, I'm going to guess. It is. Move to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Partridge. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. All in favor? Yeah. Carried. And we already have the record on the